Hello everyone, welcome back to another deck profile with me, Chocobilly, and this week I am looking at a mono water deck called SeaWorld. So as you can imagine, it's focused on water, and monsters and things of the sea. Yeah, so despite being about a month into Opus 21 now, there's actually only one Opus 21 card in the deck, and as you can imagine, it is one that synergizes nicely with monsters. Obviously, it's Gao. On top of that, there's just a buttload of monsters and things I hadn't really played yet, but I hadn't built a really, truly monster-focused deck in a while, so I just wanted to get this out of my system. And you know what? It works surprisingly well. So, I'm going to start with the backups. Summons, forwards and monsters, they kind of fill the same slot, to be perfectly honest with you, so yeah, I'll just kind of dip between the two. But yeah, first up we've got backups. So obviously Sarah, be able to search either Gordon or Ash. Gordon, nice consistency card, draw, discard, pay additional water, so he's good at either backup number 2, backup number 1, you know, whatever. It's either way, he's hopefully going to be getting you more and more backups. Ash is very nice, obviously he's an EX burst, be able to activate something, but also being able to return to your hand if you've got Leviathan on the field, minus 9k something, pretty simple. Loporrit. So when Loporrit enters the field, you get to draw 2 cards and place 1 card from your hand at the bottom of your deck. That's really nice because it's not one of the 2 cards you draw, it's any card within your hand you get to put in the bottom of the deck. And then you get to do it again for a break as well, which is very, very nice. And then you've got Astrologian, which is very similar but not exactly the same. So you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 of those to your hand, put 1 to the top and 1 to the bottom. So you don't add all 3 to your hand and then put 1 from your hand to the top, 1 from your hand to the bottom. It is of those 3, keep 1, and then put the other 2 back in the deck. So yeah, don't get confused between these 2 cards' effects because I did it multiple times. I don't play water very often, and so whenever I'm playing all these sorts of cards, I always forget what they do because they're so similar, but also not. And to be honest with you, those 11 backups are plenty to get you going. If you've already got Gordon on the field, Sarah into an Ash. If you've already got Gordon and Ash on the field, to be able to Sarah to get rid of another Gordon, or even herself from the deck, to be able to, you know, siphon out all those useless dead draws, is very, very nice. Right, on to the summons. So first up we have a XXI the Impure, because it's a really, really good card. Now, you could probably up this to 2, maybe even the 3, because it is an EX burst and a very, very useful card that just negates so many cards' abilities and stops them in their tracks. So yeah, XXI is a fantastic card, but for the sake of just shoving as many monsters as I can into the deck, I only put 1 in. Atomos, 3 Atomos, because it's Atomos. I mean, you could easily probably have Yuna in the backup line here to reduce these cards' costs, but I, put Atomos in here. You could argue the case for putting Famfrit in here as well, as an EX burst, because you've got so many monsters. There is a good chance that you wouldn't have a forward on the field, but I would rather have the certainty of playing something where I know I'm getting rid of my opponent's forward without any of my forwards dying, because I don't. It might be a case that I really want to keep Leviathan on the field or Gal on the field. So, yeah, Atomos is just a safer bet in my opinion. Leviathan. So if you cast Leviathan, you may remove 10 water cards. I don't care about that, but choose 1 auto ability triggered from a forward. Cancel its effect. I wonder what card in Opus 21 this might work particularly well against when I'm running a monsters deck. Yeah, this card is basically in here just to counter Neo-X Death in Earth, because, oh look, you're going to break all my forwards and all my monsters. No, you're not. So yeah, having Leviathan in hand at all times, if you're up against, you know, even if you're not up against Earth, because, you know, your opponent could just play out Colors for whatever reason. So yeah, keeping this in hand to make sure you're safe from any board wipes is pretty important. Then we've got XXI. So this is a bit of a weird one, and this is kind of my compromise for not having Famfrit in the deck, I guess. It's choose 1 forward at the beginning of the main phase 1, put it into the break zone. So still put into the break zone, so still fulfills that prerequisite of getting around no break or damage effects. It's just put from the break zone, and it is also an EX burst. Now obviously it's worse if it comes to hand because you have to pay 4 for it. But still, it's quite nice in my opinion. I quite like it, and also, technically, that forward will still stay on the field after the EX burst is resolved as well, because it triggers at the next main phase 1. So if you do hit as an EX, that forward will still stay on the field until the end of the turn. So if the forward you choose has an end of the turn effect, yeah, it's still going to get that effect off. But ultimately, you get to make the choice as well. It's not your opponent, so you get to choose what dies. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. And then finally the 6 CP Leviathan, because it's just a really good card. Getting back your Gao, your Leviathan, your Realm, your Lightning is very important, but equally so is putting the 7-cost Warrior of Light on top of your opponent's deck, or just bouncing something when you've got a Leviathan on the field and kill something else as well, you know, whatever. Ultimately, just really good summon. Right, anyway, let's get on to... I'll do the forwards first, because not many of them, and then I'll move on to the monsters. So, Lightning. When Lightning enters the field, choose one forward. If the number of forwards your opponent controls is greater than the number of forwards you control, remove from the game. Chances are that will be the case most of the time, because most of your monsters won't become forwards until you make them forwards. So you could have, you know, a Tross, a Echidna, 2 Tomberries, and 2 Blue Worms down, and whilst you've technically got, you know, 6 forwards, and then you play Lightning, your 7th, actually you only have Lightning as your only forward, and your opponent, even if they have 2, with that many monsters on the field, your opponent wants to put up a big wide board to stop you from being able to push through, so then perfect time to play Lightning, and then even Lightning S if you want to. Realm, searching 2 monsters onto the field, so looking at the cost 1s and 2s that you can play, so you've got, well, I guess, actually I'll save Realm to the end of the forward, so you can then look at all the monsters on top of that. And then you've got Gao, so he can become 0, -1 for each monster you control, which is very, very easy in this deck. There's 19 monsters, but also being able to put something back into your opponent's deck is nice, but most importantly, be able to dull Gao to then make something that normally wouldn't become a forward is very useful. Or even, you know, if, let's say, Blue Worm, for example, isn't a forward, making it a forward, but it not dying at the end of the turn is really good. Or even, technically, you make Blue Worm a forward, you attack with it, your opponent blocks, and then use Gao to make it become an 8k, so now it maybe trades up or doesn't die. That's kind of funny as well if your opponent forgets about Gao's effect. But yeah, ultimately, Gao, really, really useful card. The only reason there's only 2 in the deck is because I only own 2, but you could easily put 3 in if you really wanted. And then Leviathan, because it's Leviathan, you get to bounce things, and it works really nice with stupid amounts of water things. So yeah, run Leviathan, because it's Leviathan. Anyway, yeah, so Realm. The cost 1 monsters you can play are Adamantoise, Spice Sicilian, Tonberry, and Bluegoo. And then of the 2 costs, you've got Blue Worm, Tross, Echidna, and Tonberry. So nothing particularly surprising there. The only monster I haven't included, which a lot of people probably would say I should have included, is, I think it's Sahagin King, which gains a counter for every water character you play onto the field. Once after 3 counters, you can then bounce any 2 forwards, which is, you know, pretty good. But ultimately, I'd rather just have more persistent forwards on the field, and if I do have monsters on the field that can be put from the field into the break zone, I'd rather they didn't cost too much. That's why most of my break for monsters are things like Tonberry or Adamantoise, where they only cost 1 anyway. And then obviously Realm at damage 5, you know, you can bounce a forward your opponent controls. If you have damage 5, sorry, if you control 5 monsters, you get to bounce a forward your opponent controls at the end of your turn. It's, again, incredibly easy to get to 5 monsters in this deck. I mean, you play Realm onto the field, you've immediately at 2. Chances are you'll have 3 more on the field anyway, so yeah. Adamantoise. So, I was actually struggling to think of any 1 costs in Mono Water that just kind of fit the bill. Adamantoise, -3k to something, and then draw a card. That I'm fine with, to be perfectly honest, just to be able to draw a card, because, let's say, hypothetically, your opponent wants to, I don't know, attack with something. You use Gao to make Adamantoise become a forward. You block with Adamantoise, then you put Adamantoise into the break zone to then save another forward, and you get a card off of it as well. So, you know, there's worse things that could happen. But ultimately, just a little bit of protection, that's fine. You could put any 1-cost monster into the deck though, and it'd be alright. Evray, for example, would still be good, but I wanted to keep it as water-focused as I could. Spice Sicilian. So this is obviously one of the weird ones I've put in. Now, yes, Evray and Atomos tend to work a bit better because you get backups back. The Spice Sicilian, when you're able to make 1 costs into forwards, with Gao, for example, that's actually quite fun. Or even if you've just got things like Tross or Echidna being able to attack, yeah, just making it so that they have to be blocked by 2 or 1 costs by your opponent. But yeah, the real fun play here is having it so that you actually Spice Sicilian to make, I don't know, your Bluegoo become a forward using Gao, and then it can only be blocked by a 1 cost. Nice way to be able to sneak under your opponent's deck. Tonberry, so this is a weird one again, but card that I wanted to trial and actually was very useful against Earth, because my opponent did not want to play Tyro whilst you've got Tonberry in the field, because yes, Tyro searches you any forward, but you also really want it there for its color fixing. So trying to find some other means of breaking it with a search is actually, if you don't have that immediately to hand, can be kind of annoying. So yeah, really, really fun card to play with, and I recommend maybe throwing one of in if you're running a mono water deck, because this out of the blue massively changes what your opponent will do. Now, it does need to be played fairly early because, you know, if your opponent plays something like Sarah, for example, which is where most search lies within decks these days, you know, back up consistency, sorry. So yeah, you probably want to get Tomberry down as early as you can. However, being able to break things like Barsh when it enters the field, or I'm trying to think of any other forwards that might search. Can't. I mean, there are loads, aren't there? Alphano, the Fire Alphano. Not that he's a particularly great forward on the field once he's on the field, but you know what I mean. It gets rid of a forward, which for 1 CP, and technically a card out of hand, or from your deck even, because it might be searched out of realm, you know, isn't too bad in my opinion. And then Blue Goo. So this is a really fun card. So when it enters the field, choose one forward, dull it, or activate it. So you can dull one of your opponent's forwards, you can activate one of yours, you can activate one of your opponent's forwards if you really wanted to. But ultimately, being able to use Blue Goo's effect on a couple of things is a lot of fun, because let's say hypothetically Blue Goo enters the field, you can then dull Gao, make something a forward, reactivate it with Blue Goo, dull him again, so you've now got 2 forwards out of Gao's effect, which is quite nice. Or similarly, if you make Spice Sicilian a forward, then you dull it for its effect, Blue Goo reactivates Spice Sicilian, Spice Sicilian again. If you've got 2/1 costs which can't be blocked by anything, your opponent can't do anything about it. Yeah, what's your opponent going to do about it? And then obviously it's got a break effect as well. So choose one auto ability, choosing a forward you control, cancel its effect. Didn't get played as often as you might think, but still very, very useful if hypothetically your opponent's got something like, I don't know, the Fire, Lightning, Y'shtola, couldn't remember his name for a minute, and it's trying to deal damage when you're taking points of damage. You can cancel it potentially with Blue Goo. I mean, there's loads of different alternatives out there, but oh yeah, it's fine. Being able to stop an auto ability on a forward you control is nice. Blue Worm. It's Blue Worm, gets you a card. Tross, it's Tross. When it attacks, you get to bounce. Or if you bounce anything else, you get a card to hand as well. Works really nicely with Realm, because if you've got 5, you bounce something, and at a turn, you draw a card. And similarly with Leviathan as well, you get cards to hand. Doesn't work with Ash, because only when a forward your opponent controls is bounced, so you're not getting a card from that. But still, really annoying forward for your opponent to have to deal with. Again, if you're able to attack with Tross and Spice Sicilian at it at the same time, you can then bounce the only blocker with Tross. Maybe that pushes your point for game. Echidna, being able to get back, you know, one of your 10 summons is very, very useful. Again, getting back Cuchulainn could be good. Get back a Tomos to be able to kill one of your opponent's forwards. Very useful. Tomberry, because it just being sat there ready to stab something is a lot of fun. Octomammoth. So this is one of the few monsters that actually will be a forward, whether or not you like it. I say that it's based or dependent on your backup count. So if hypothetically you have 3 backups, one of those is Ash, you go to combat, Ash comes back to your hand, it's no longer a forward. So you have to be mindful of things like that, but playing Octomammoth onto the field to choose 2 forwards your opponent controls and return them to their hand, that's one of the reasons I didn't run the Sahagin King. I'd rather run something like Octomammoth. It isn't searchable off of Realm, but it doesn't require you to play as much to be able to get the effect. So, and ultimately you can kind of use Sahagin King when you want, whereas Octomammoth is when it's in your hand and you can play it. But still, Octomammoth King for an 8k to bounce 2 things, that's fine in my book. Finally, 1 Sanctuary Keeper, because again, being able to activate one of your forwards is very nice. So with Gao, very useful. Or again, if you make one of these forwards have an effect, and then Spice Sicilian, something like that, you know, ultimately being able to lock things and do things with them is a bit of fun as well. And then finally, Hippocampus, because maybe you get to deal lots of damage to your opponent's board. I think the most I ever did was 7. So that's 14 water characters on the field, which isn't great. And that's another reason I didn't run Evray and Atomos, is that I wanted to give Hippocampus a fair try and just be able to use it and try and kill something. Didn't really ever happen, but it does protect against some of the smaller forwards that can be killed through damage, so actually there was a fair reason for it to be there. And again, it's dull 3 active characters other than Hippocampus, so Blue Goo, activate a forward, so you can obviously dull a forward for a Hippocampus' effect, reactivate it with Blue Goo, and similar with Sanctuary Keeper as well. And that is my monsters deck. Like I said, you could easily switch out some of the monsters for other things as well, like the Sahagin King, Evray, Atomos if you really wanted. I never really used Hippocampus that much, but that's not to say it isn't good. I personally just didn't want to use it that much. Or never had the opportunity to have it in a situation where having it on the field even was better than anything else in my hand. But it was a lot of fun, even though there are a lot more cards in the game now that do counter against monsters, like Neo XF and the new 3CP Odin, which breaks a monster and draws a card. Still, monsters are really hard to target. Your opponent might be in wind and have the precast Alexander, you know, they might have all these different things, but regardless, they have to wait until these generally have become forwards till they can target them. So having things like Sanctuary Keeper and maybe Hippocampus that aren't traditionally going to become forwards that have annoying effects might pose a problem for your opponent. Anyway, yeah, let me know what you guys think of the deck, how you might change things up a bit. You could easily take this into Water Lightning as well if you wanted. Maybe put some Urianger in the deck as well. That's the style I ran many moons ago in like Opus 18, and it was a lot of fun, to be fair. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I will see you in the next episode.